Hello. Hi. So, hi, bro guy. You're right, sweetheart. I feel like I'm like really far away from the camera at the moment. Oh, well, too late to move furniture, I guess. Hey, brainless. And you're right, Miss Shadow. And excuse me, I am not fried. I am not northern, thank you very much. Although beer battered Mars bars are fucking amazing. They're so tasty. They shouldn't taste that good. But they do. They do. Yep. I'm good. I've had a few bad days this week, one of which left me not being able to walk because fun. It always feels so good to feel like you're being fingered by Freddy Krueger. Yep, beautiful. And Spawn, she's doing good. She had to go to the dentist the other day and get some dental work done, and because she is like an anxious thing like me, they gave her gas and air. So, yeah. It's all good. Anyway, do the thing and the stuff and the stuff and the thing. Yeah, cramps can fuck. Right, basically, long story short, when I had Spawn, labour, not good. It was like 3 days labour. Well, 3 days, 15 hours. And that was awful. And then when she was finally, it wouldn't. And they had to, and that went wrong. So, I have nerve damage. What? Okay, that looks like it could be an interesting story. Okay, yeah, definitely going to read that. Wow, 9 hours. I wish. Although I do know someone that gave birth like very quickly. And like even in that, that's very dangerous. So it's like very dangerous to give birth too quickly because like apparently the baby can go into shock. So yeah, and I don't know what's happened, but the camera looks like it's like zoomed in now. Is it just me? It's probably just me. No, it doesn't involve a killer chia pet. This one, I just like quit over it, and I see, oh, cabin in the woods, great cabin, loved it. When I built the cabin, great, loved it. Me and my friend went to the cabin in the woods, great, loved it. And then the next paragraph starts with, and I'm screaming like the first sentence and the last sentence of each thing. I always pegged Simon, and I'm like, what? Then double read over it. It's like, oh, I'd always peg Simon as a do. I'm like, oh, okay. Wrong kind of pegging. Oh, and then it also involves gouging one's own eyes out. So, there's that. I'm a bit hyper. You're right, J. Troy. How are you, hun? I really need to change the name of my Reddit. Fucking randomized names. Oh, yes, this one. So, this story actually read was the ones they've done. Just like they're good. Like, I think they're good. And this is again from Scary Max, spelled with 2 X's, because I guess they're extreme. And this is, I found several books inside a corpse. They were the greatest things I've ever read. Over the years, I found a lot of crazy shit inside people. A penny from 1932 lodged in an old man's small intestine, probably for decades. A knife blade that broke off in an abdomen and stayed there for 2 years. Bottle caps, gum, rocks, and a My Little Pony. I think it was Rainbow Dash. But this is the first time I'd ever found books. The deceased man must have put the deceased man must have put a decent amount of work into ingesting them. The pages had been cut from their bindings and rolled into tight columns, then placed in several greased plastic bags and shoved down the esophagus fairly violently. None of that was fatal, of course. The rest of my analysis caught a gunshot wound, subcutaneous bruising, and shattered bones, suggesting a fall from a great height, and finally, significant liquid in the lungs. No surprise there, as they'd been pulled from the harbour. Based on these findings, I concluded that the deceased was likely shot in the back while walking on a bridge and subsequently fell several hundred feet into the water. For some reason, though, I hesitated to mention the swallowed pages in my official coroner's report. Truth be told, I'd opened a bag and read the first few sentences of page 1, right there next to the body. In the year 1601, with the help of a half-dead bloodhound, I discovered the 4th stairway to hell. 2 years later, I will begin my descent to that fiery place. What follows is a true account of that adventure. The sentences were captivating, but even more striking was the title page. The work was called Don Cervantes and was attributed to Miguel de Cervantes, with a publication date of 1611, translated by Thomas Goodwell in 1665. As I continued to flip through the pages, it became immediately clear that it was a work of fiction, and one of the best things I'd ever read. Leafing through to the end, I saw that the book ended mid-sentence. It was only a partial manuscript. Quickly, I tore up the other bags, hoping to find the rest of the novel. Instead, I found two wholly different works. One was a longish short story by Edgar Allan Poe, entitled The Wrath of the Earthworm. It chronicled a man's experience being buried alive and his ongoing argument with an earthworm waiting for his demise. It had been a while since I'd read Poe, but I felt with some certainty that this was by far the best thing of his I'd ever read. The third manuscript was a novel written in the late 90s. An author named Sarah Nave, who I'd never heard of. It seemed to be about a group of teenage girls who spent their last summer of high school working at a haunted amusement park. As soon as I started reading it, I couldn't stop. Whoever Sarah Nave was, she had the horror chops of Stephen King and the literary veracity of Cormac McCarthy. It seemed impossible that she hadn't been a best-selling phenomenon. Yet, when I searched for her name on Google, I couldn't find a single hit. As far as the internet was concerned, she didn't exist. The same was true for Poe's story and Cervantes' book. Not a single reference existed for either one. I could have just turned the stories in. If I had, it would have saved me all of the pain that followed. But there was something in me that just wouldn't allow it. I'm thorough, I suppose. That's always just been how I am. I've never started a book that I didn't finish. I wasn't about to break that habit now. I took one last look at the corpse, realizing I might be looking at my own future. Whoever had shot this man wasn't going to stop looking until they'd retrieved their books. Then I surreptitiously stashed all 3 manuscripts in my backpack and tossed the bags that they came in. Then I filled out the official report without any mention of the corpse's stomach or its contents. Back at home, after work, I opened my backpack and devoured all 3 books. Coming off of them, I was buzzing with excitement and furious that they were all only partially complete. I was left with Cervantes' narrator sitting down to a tea party with the devil, with Poe's protagonist finally clasping the earthworm with his left pinky, with Nave's main character facing off with a possessed boyfriend in the Hall of Mirrors. Of course, as soon as I'd finished reading, I got online and checked every resource I could. Google again yielded nothing. Same with Quora and Reddit. I even tried Bing. None of them mentioned a single reference to any of the books. Desperate, I scrolled through old Facebook contacts, half remembering an old high school girlfriend who'd gone on to get a PhD in English literature. She was married now with a kid, and it took about 4 hours of me to think of a way to reach out that didn't feel creepy. Mark D. Hi, Claudia. Long time no talk. I happened to come into possession of a few books by some famous authors, and one unknown, that I have some questions about. Not really my area of expertise. Any chance I could get your eye on these? Not sure if you're still local. Claudia N. Hi, Mark. Surprised you still remembered me. Depends on the authors. I'm focused mostly on Mexican-American literature, specifically poetry. Seems unlikely that you'd found anything like that. Well, one is a translation of Cervantes. I know he's Spanish, so maybe that's related? Seems like previously unknown work. Claudia M. I'm listening. It turns out that Claudia was working at the University of Oregon, up in Eugene, just a few hours north of Klamath Falls. I made the drive up there next weekend, and we met in the university library. She was definitely older now, but still as gorgeous as when we dated for a few months sophomore year. Not that she was interested in anything like that. Claudia was all business. That manuscript, she said. Let me see it. I handed it over and she sat down at the table. She was immediately engrossed reading the book with the same concentration I might exhibit carving through a sternum. Finally, she looked at me, her eyes wide. If this is real, she said, this is probably the most important literary discovery in 100 years. This could completely change the way we see Spanish literature, world literature. This is like the literary missing link, connective tissue that links Dante to the modern novel. It also might be the first horror novel ever created. She took a deep breath. Where's the rest of it? That's all I've got, I said. Can you get the rest of it? She asked. I shook my head. I found it in a kind of unusual circumstance, I said. If we had the rest of it, this could be world-changing, she said. Did you say you had other manuscripts? I nodded and provided her the others. She read both with a rapt attention, like a starving person thrown a Wagyu beef steak. She didn't speak a word to me for hours until she'd read every word of both partial manuscripts. Each of these, on its own, would constitute a literary earthquake. Why can't I say that word? Literary. Fuck it. Would constitute a literary earthquake, she said, almost shaking. Together they suggest something more. Like what? I asked. Like a private collection, she said. A private collection stretching back centuries, potentially containing several of the greatest literary works ever known. She was almost hyperventilating now. Do you need some water or something? I asked her. I was trying to be chivalrous. I was also starting to remember how nice it had felt to kiss her by the lake after homecoming, how soft her lips had felt, how nice it felt to be bringing her something that made her salivate. Can I keep these? She asked, but I shook my head. Sorry, I said. I feel like I should hold on to them. Suddenly, she grabbed my arm, her eyes wild. She leaned in close. Get the rest of these books, she said. We could change the world. These are good, great. They might be amongst the best things I've ever read. The rest of the world didn't get a chance to read these. It would be... I understand, I said, picking up the manuscripts. I do. Of course, there was nothing I could do. I took the books home and reread them. They were really quite good. I was no expert, but I liked to read. All three, even incomplete, captured my attention in a way no other book had for years. Unfortunately, I knew I would never have found the rest. I would never find out any more. The idea of it filled me with an odd dread. There were certain questions in life that you needed answered before you died. Had your childhood crush ever felt the same way? Did your parents truly prefer your brother over you? And what happened at the end of these fucking books? Somehow, this question had become more important than any other. For days, I couldn't sleep. I tried to make up my own endings, but all of it seemed contrived. I was sure the Martha had come up with superior endings I needed to read, and yet, what hope was there of me ever finding out? As I tossed, sleepless, another thought hit me. Whoever owned these novels must have tried very hard to make sure they weren't stolen. I thought of the body I'd found, the bullets piercing his back. Whoever he was, he'd gone to great lengths to smuggle these books out in his stomach. And he'd paid the ultimate price. Was I willing to push it that far? To do whatever it took to know the endings? Then, 2 nights later, I got a knock on the door. I opened it to find a man in a blue pinstripe suit holding a hunting knife in his right hand. "So sorry about this," he said, "but it's come to our attention that you have something that belongs to the library. We'll need it back." I backed up into my living room. I'd seen enough bodies to know how my autopsy might read. 2 stab wounds to the chest, causing a cessation of cardiovascular function. The victim put up a little fight, likely due to the sudden nature of the attack. "Please," I said, "I'm happy to comply with whatever demands." I was stumbling over my words, barely able to hear my own thoughts. For all the dead bodies I'd seen, I'd never really imagined myself joining them. In truth, I was a coward. I'd been challenged to 2 fights in high school and run away from both, much to the derision of my peers. After that, I'd lost the few friends I had. Dating was an impossibility. My life was a joke. "Just give me the manuscripts," said the man. "Then we can talk." My heart was pounding. Fear gripped me like the hands of a ghost reaching through my chest, squeezing my heart with icy fingers. And yet, strangely, the thought that came to mind wasn't that I was afraid to die. It was that I didn't want to go before I finished the stories. What happened to Don Cervante at his tea party with Lucifer? Did Poe's narrator defeat the worm? And who survived the haunted amusement park? If I die, I'd never know. "You can't let me live," I said a few seconds later. "You can't let me talk any more about what I've read." The man met my eyes, his expression suddenly deadly serious. "So you told someone," he said. "No matter. Must have missed it in our first look. We'll find out who. Easier if you tell us, of course." That's when I reached into my open bag by my side and pulled out a scalpel. I brought it home more often than you'd think. Sometimes I'd use it to practice on an orange or a piece of leather. I made the cleanest cuts of anyone at the coroner's office. "You don't want to go down this road," said the man. "Even if you were to beat me, there are others who would follow. The end result is inevitable." He took a step towards me, knife in hand. "Out of curiosity," he said, "before I kill you, why did you take the stories from the corpse? It would have been easy enough to just turn them into your bosses. This could have all just gone away. Now, unfortunately, you have to go." "I don't relish this. It's just the way it has to be." "That's the thing," I said. "I don't need to live forever. I just want to find out how the stories end." And so, for the first time in my life, I didn't run. Instead, I rushed at him, scalpel in hand. We both stabbed forward, but only one of us had pierced 1,000 bodies. Only one of us knew the perfect spot to stab a human heart. And so, a minute later, I sat in the living room next to his body. I was bleeding from a minor stab wound to the abdomen. He'd hit nothing critical. For all his talk, he ended up being an amateur. And as I sat there bleeding, I searched his pockets and found his wallet. There was an ID, probably fake, a useless credit card. I tossed it aside. Then finally I found what I'd been looking for all along. A library card. A membership to a very private collection downtown. I texted Claudia with a picture and a smiley face. We're going to read the end of these stories, even if it kills us. And that's it so far. Yep, anime sword clash. I'm more powerful than you could imagine. I may just look like some weakling, but I studied and learned from the great master Zeraroth. Not Zeraroth. No one's heard from him for 1,000 years. Where's the thing I'm looking for? There's the bastard. Yeah, if you want to know, like, see a YouTuber that does the funniest fucking videos about that sort of shit, there's this girl called like Stanzy. Hang on, I'll find her channel. She does absolutely amazing taking the piss stuff. Yeah, sorry, no cup. Absolutely gasping at the moment. All I could think of throughout that is like, yeah, there is a collection like that. It's called the Vatican. Like, they have so many books in there. Any book that's been banned, it is like 90% likely that even though they banned the book, they kept copies of it. They didn't destroy all of them. They kept copies of these like banned literature. So, you know, they couldn't have been that banned. That's it, Stanzy. Ugh. Like, we know the Vatican has a huge library, right? That's not anything secretive whatsoever. We know that they've got like hundreds of like versions of the Bible. They've got hundreds of religious scrolls of like chapters of the Bible that they've not put in there. Like that's just known, right? It's not that big of a deal. But Von, like, I don't even know how to do that. Like, Von would fucking, like, Von thinks fucking slugs can clean his house. And, like, granted, like, a lot of people shit on Napoleon, but, like, the idea of Napoleon being short isn't true. He was actually average size for people then. So, yeah, I don't know. What what's the lie? What does he think Napoleon found out? Did his gods like bless him with a fucking dreamscape with Napoleon or something? Oh, okay. Yeah, I've read a few of this person's stories. I do think they are quite good at it. Oh my god, he's created his own religion now. Jesus fucking Christ. And yeah, the majority of religions are a lie. Like, if we go with being an atheist, all religions are a lie. If you go with looking at it like more objectively, Christianity is a lie because most of the ideas of Christianity are stolen from other religions. Egypt, the Egyptian gods and Egyptology is a lie because there's like the Egyptology that most people know, and then there's like Egyptology which is like predating that, where the Upper Nile and the Lower Nile used to be separate, their own separate belief systems, and then they joined together and created the new one, and it's like the gods combined, blah blah blah. So then that means that religion isn't it, that's it, and you have to go back and back and back and back in time. Like it's just a never ending thing. Just believe what you want to believe and don't be a fucking hateful prick. And hey, Adam love. Yeah, pretty much. Like my beliefs are still very fluid. I'm not sure what I think. Like, I certainly don't believe in like magic and all that shit. I don't believe in like you can do a spell and make things happen. I think that's more like within your mind. You're doing things, and yeah, it's more like yeah, it's not really actually manipulating the world. You're tricking your brain into thinking a different way. I don't know. God damn it. Can Vaughn just hurry up and die? Like, I know that sounds mean as shit, but seriously. It would do everyone a whole hell of a lot of good if he did. His kids might actually be happy and hope to inherit some of the fucking inheritance. Now, where's the other story? Okay, I'm going to read one different one because I cannot remember His legs have never looked good though, or has something actually happened? Is he crazy and full of infection? We already know he's lost all his teeth. You better hurry up before, like, if you want to make sure we're all in a hell cell before he dies. And Adam, we're kind of like trashing on the guy that I sort of explained to you about the other day. The one that has the 3 kids and lost them like 12, 13 times when they're only like 13, 14 years old. You know, that piece of shit. Yeah. You know, the one who believes that he blew up a fucking gopher with his mind. Do, 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 do. Ooh, this one, I don't think I've read this. This is Bed and Breakfast 1858. Oh yeah, he thinks that the government nuked Godzilla because he called them and warned them it was coming or some shit. What else? I told him about Von thinks that he was the basis for the Punisher. Oh my god, I didn't tell him. Apparently, Von Helton is the original like karate Kyle meme. But yeah, anyone that like knows more with Von Helton, tell Adam so we can torture him. We have to torture the new guy. It's the rules. Anyway, I'm gonna have a sip of drink before I read. Do 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 do. Fuck. Oh yeah, I've got a new fake fireplace. Oh yeah, you got the train tickets. Yay! Not sure if I like the extensions that much or not. I'm probably going to cut off that weird little bit of extra length it gives, because it's just giving off like ratty scene girl vibes hair, where you know, like they only bought those few layers and it was like thick going into thin. Yeah, my neighbour gave me the fake fire, which I love them. I prefer real fires, but you know, it's better than nothing. So that means hopefully in the future I'm going to be able to have the fake fire going in the background. So like that will be a nice little aesthetic. Anyway, to reading. not here to me babble on about my bullshit. You're here to watch me babble on about other people's bullshit. Streetwalker hair. I've never heard it called like that, but it makes sense. Anyway. Bed and Breakfast, 1858. I've always been a fan of history. What can I say? I like hearing about the stories of the old times, the spirit of them. Every time my teacher sent an assignment home from school about talking to my family members who'd seen some time period, I would practically bounce off the walls. I love it all. Every aspect of it, from documenting everything to hearing the stories themselves. I've always gravitated towards a particular family member, my grandfather, Daniel. When I was a really little kid, he was about 80 to 85, stooped low from years of hunching, clutching onto his cane like his life was dependent on it. He was always quiet. My mum and my aunts always doted on him, constantly telling any outsider of the family that he was the best father, the best role model, best everything. But I didn't really see it. He was just silent whenever he was just silent whenever I came into the ring. Sometimes I would play next to him, attempting to break him out of his shell, but he always averted his gaze from mine. Old person shakes dominating his demeanour. Still, when I asked questions about his life from the 1930s to the 80s, he would always answer. His stories were always entertaining, to say the least. He told me a bit about his father, my great-grandfather, Peter, who died before I was born, how he grew up in London, eventually moved to America, fell in love with a woman and had kids, how he'd watched the wars, how he was lucky enough to dodge the draft for Vietnam because of something. He never did tell me what. He died when I turned 13. It was a suicide. He downed his sleeping pills, drank a half bottle of vodka, and kicked the bucket right next to my grandmother Alice. She was a no-nonsense type of woman. Washed my mouth out with soap once for saying damn in the kitchen in front of her. But I'd never seen her so solemn at the funeral. She didn't exactly cry, but I caught her out of the corner of my eye, wiping tears away with a proper, crisp black handkerchief. He killed himself the night of Valentine's Day. They had a picnic that day, same as every year. About a week later, Alice decided to clean out his old study. I guess in a half-hearted attempt to forget the betrayal Daniel forced on her. Dozens and dozens of full boxes of documents, records, letters, and newspaper clippings were generously dumped into our attic, locked away by my mother, who'd seen a black widow spider up there once and forbade me from even looking up there in case the spider had other ideas for us. So everything sat, creaking and collapsing under the weight of the years passing by, and soon I turned 22, freshly graduating out of college. My mother had invited me over to help her pack up. Alice was long gone, I was grown up, and she decided that she would start spending her pre-golden years over in a condo by the sea. Hey, I respect the hustle. I would want to get away from the town of buttfuck nowhere too. So I came over to the house around noon today and began to work. Things were going well. We managed to pack all of her clothes in the span of about 20 minutes. Wow, she doesn't have a lot of clothes. Started stacking books and trinkets she had laying around the house and placing them gently in boxes next to the front door. Soon we were done. We only needed to pack her personal belongings, and the movers would handle the furniture, the appliances, and everything else. But somehow my mind wandered to the attic, to what was in the attic. So, as my mother sat down to rest on the couch, propping her feet up and dozing off easily, I snagged the key to the attic from the vase she'd hidden it in 8 years ago and sneakily pulled the attic ladder down. Despite the fact nobody had been up there in at least 8 years, there wasn't much in the way of foreboding, unforgiving, loud sound emerging from the ladder's rope that would give away what I was up to. In fact, it was like it also went out of its way to make sure I could get away with my investigation. Like it too wanted me to uncover the secrets left behind by my grandfather. I wish now that it didn't. The attic was damp, and that was never a good sign. I inwardly groaned because I knew some of the paper and boxes were already gone. Humidity likes to crawl into the confines of papers, warping and bloating them, making them illegible and hard to even pick up, let alone read. But even from where I stood, I could see that quite a few of the initial boxes actually intact, set on top of Alice's old antique dining table she never wanted us to throw out. And on the small stack of boxes sat a journal. It was definitely dilapidated, but it wasn't really too destroyed, even for its age. And from there, I could see that it was old, way too old for me to be looking at comfortably, but it also seemed preserved, like someone was trying to take care of it. Something didn't seem right. I figured it was okay to take a peek. I mean, I love history, and this seemed to be important to my family records. So I delicately opened the hardback cover and immediately realised that the handwriting was different than anyone in my family's. It was loopy, quite fancy, and the word choice, dictation, and spelling suggested that the writer was British. Okay, made sense. Excuse me. Daniel's father, my great grandfather, Peter, was British. Explained a bit. The writing started normally, mostly letters to Daniel, who was a fully grown adult at the time, asking him about his life like he couldn't have been. What? Asking him about his life like he couldn't have been asked himself. I could tell that things were tense between Peter and Daniel, and perhaps that's why Daniel never seemed to keep pictures of his family around the house like Alice did with hers. There was some sort of huge falling out back in the 60s, and both Peter and Daniel never seemed to recover. Everything was written in about the span of 2 months, but the journal was completely full, like Peter had so much to say. So I planted my butt on a dusty canvas-covered seat and began to read. To Daniel, I have so much I desire to say to you, but I'm on the last days, and though I wish you would come and visit, perhaps it is best that you do not. I have a story I would like to tell you, something that happened to me in 1858. I was a young man at the time, perhaps 21. A friend George and myself had decided to visit Whitechapel for the winter season to see our families. I was not married to Florence at the time, but had been courting, and I missed her terribly. So the trip had been needed. While we travelled, the weather had grown so horrible, to the point of where ice on the trees turned to spikes, and wind blew them onto the ground at full force. It became dangerous, and we were forced to reside in a bed and breakfast for a few nights. It was unusual, to say the least. I had frequented Whitechapel for years, and I had never seen it before. It was cosy, quite large, homely and warm, George and I were immensely thankful for the accommodation, and I could tell that this would be our favourite bed and breakfast yet. It was clean, well kept, and as we shook the snow and sludge from our coats, tromping the ice out from our boots on the pristine flooring, a woman descended the staircase to greet us. She was also unusual, just like her abode. She wore all black, a classic morning dress donned with a black shawl, her raven hair massed high on her head, and on the crown of her hairline sat a circlet of fine red rubies. She smiled politely at us, and we were helplessly smitten without even hearing a word. "Welcome to my inn, gentlemen. My name is Lady Amelia. I am the governess here. I have beds to offer you, if you can pay, of course." Lord forgive me, for I was not thinking of your mother then, and then it was like Amelia had gripped my mind with claws and kept it close to her heart without even saying a word. Before either of us realised, we had paid for a week's stay. "Thank you very much, sirs. Before I show you to your rooms, I would like to state that there are 3 rules I have for my affairs. The first is that I do not establish personal relationships with my tenants. I hope that is understandable." "Oh, very. Oh, oh, very," George whispered, licking his lips once as he stared at her. Amelia's eyes were captivating, but there was something wrong. It was like she was looking at us with desire, with hunger, like she was assessing us and our sizes, but not with benevolent intent. I can't imagine wanting to bed tenants like us. Her mouth had twisted into a ghost of a smile, pulling the shawl around her arms a little tighter, and I could have sworn then that I saw something. George was much too entranced, too tempted by lust, but I could not stop repeating what it was that I saw in my mind. Something in her hair moved. It had the appearance of an arachnid's leg, segmented and furry as it pulled itself into the elaborate mass she had on her head. I suppose it thought itself as far too exposed, and it occurred so quickly that I had no idea at the moment what to even begin thinking. "Such a fine sense of humour you have. My second rule is that I mustn't be disturbed past 9. When that clock rings true, my door will be locked, and you will have no way of reaching me until morning." That rule struck me as unusual as well. What sort of governess refrains from assisting her tenants, especially those who pay to stay? It seems as though she was using all humanly restraint possible from even establishing trust with us. A pinprick of awareness snaked through my head, and soon I was able to listen to her honeyed words a little bit clearer. "Lastly, I expect you both to live up to your commitments. You paid for a week, and for a week you shall stay. Nothing more, nothing less." There was something wrong indeed. Her words were delivered kindly, but they were threatening in nature. She had just let us know that we were not allowed to leave until the week was out. Amelia clapped her hands twice, and a servant came darting out from the kitchen. Her eyes were covered in a dirty rag, her hands wringing in worry. "Drosophia, take these fine gentlemen into their rooms. Breakfast will be served at 9. That's very late." Drosophila nodded and hurriedly and practically dragging us up the stairs. The rooms were of a stately sort, and there seemed to be nothing out of place, nothing of worry at all. But Drosophila pulled me aside as George flopped onto the bed, swaddling himself in the sheets as he drifted into a slumber. Please, leave. Leave now. The door down the hallway clicked shut as she whispered. What? Why? I demanded. But she just shook her head fervently. Please listen to me. You must leave. Your friend is much too far gone by now. But you have a chance. Think of your family. That gave me pause. My family? Who did this servant think I was? But I was inexplicably drawn to the mental image of my darling Florence, my wife, and you, my dear Daniel. How you were waiting for me at our summer home, wondering in your bright eyes when I would come home to see you again. Please go, Drosophila whimpered, pushing her damaged hands against my polished chest. And as I glanced downward, I noticed she was missing fingertips. 3 out of the 5 of her fingers on each hand were shortened artificially, or entirely gone. As I looked closer, it was as if the veils lifted from over my sight, and I could finally understand the morbid realization tugging at me from the moment I set foot into the abode. Parts of her were missing, like they had been taken out of her, with nothing left behind. She had puncture marks all down and through her neck, and the dirty rag was stained with rusty brown blood, like her eyes had been taken too. She had little to no hair, several large clumps missing at the scalp, a furious red and pulsing with pus and blood, like something had feasted on her skull. She wore rags as if they were a dress, walking with a pronounced lip, gaunt and emaciated, like she had no opportunity to eat in weeks. She has no interest in you. You can still walk free, lest she change her mind, Drosophila cried desperately, just as George sat upright in bed. Please, just... I pushed her slightly to the side as George volleyed himself out of the made bed. His eyes a glassy white as she shrieked bloody murder. It was as if he was set alight with flame. He danced and writhed as if his skin were being burnt as he awoke, throwing himself onto the floor of the throwing himself into the door of our room before breaking it down with impossible strength. Arachne, let me free, sow your many withered fields with my ruby red blood, George screamed as he vaulted towards Amelia's door. You set my heart alight, you beautiful thing. I have nothing more to lose, nothing left to give except my very soul. It was as if he were under a trance, cast with an incurable spell as he forced open the door to Amelia's room. I was helpless to run. I could not bear to run without George. I was forced to watch and listen as my dear friend toppled onto the woman's floor. Amelia was topless, her corset flung to the floor for the night as she prepared for bed. She was incredibly curvy, shapely, and I felt the tips of my ears and cheeks bloom with colour as I witnessed her. But I brought Florence to the forefront of my mind, believing that there was no room in my heart for this wicked seductress. And that seemed to break my curse entirely. She had been brushing her hair, long hair that touched the back of her knees, but it was as if the hair itself was alive. It throbbed and shivered with movement, and I could only stare as the rubies of her circlet blinked. As Amelia looked down upon George, her eyes saddened with pity before she uttered a tiny, "Oh, again." Then I could only watch as Drosophila screamed when the spider atop Amelia's head swallowed her face with its strong pincers. Soon the neck, the torso, the waist, the legs were all ingested as if they were never there at all. The only thing that remained was a shadowy silhouette of a strangely furry black widow spider lunging itself towards George. It was impossibly huge, standing at well over 9 feet tall, and each thud of the hairy feet against the floor felt like a miniature earthquake. "What the hell is that?" I shouted as it grabbed George up, releasing an unearthly demonic screech. It tossed him into the air, his lifeless body snatched by the jaws of the unholy thing before his body exploded with force, blood and gore showering both Drosophila and I. George broke in half, never blinking, breathing, only releasing a small weak groan before the spider began to eat him alive. "Please, follow me, sir," Drosophila wept as she grabbed my hands. She wrenched me towards the staircase with amazing strength, following on my heels as we descended, and she practically threw me out of the small abode. She stayed still in the doorway, hands on the threshold, as if she were attempting to drag herself out with me. "Never return to this place. You are marked by the curse of Arachne, and if you dare to search for her, everything, everyone you've ever felt dear will perish. She will know." Drosophila warned tearfully, pulling up her rag from over her poor eyes to rub them without much conscious thought. I realized then that they were not missing, not gone, like some of the other parts of her. No, they were poisoned, resembling runny eggs, as her left eye ran with acidic tears. They were red, blue, purple, so incredibly infected it was a wonder that they had not just fallen out of her skull entirely. "Please, just forget what happened. Forget you came here, and forget Lady Amelia." "I must do the same. I must forget Lady Amelia, Daniel. You should know that the woman is the devil. She is evil, and she will stop at nothing to find you. I hope you can forgive me some day, but I was curious. The curiosity with the mystery of it all, it ate me alive, and I doomed you, doomed your family, your descendants. I only hope God can properly judge me for what I have done. Arachne is the devil, and she will stop at nothing to find you and your family, just like she found me." Holy shit. I'm typing out everything. I read it about 10 minutes ago, and I'm still in shock. I expected something different. Like, I don't know, a falling out, an argument or something. Peter did eventually go looking for more information, according to some library slips in the 1920s. He wrote some of his findings in the journal, but at that point his handwriting had deteriorated so much with age and madness that it's impossible to read. All I can make out is the name Arachne, goddess, bloodline, and Daniel. It's so strange. What did Daniel have to do with all this? He never went on that trip, and only Peter came out. Did he tell his family what horrors he'd seen? And did searching for Arachne cause a chain reaction? But the real kicker was when I picked up the journal to put it on the table. A photograph and a letter came tumbling out from somewhere within the notes, hitting the floor with a soft hiss. As I picked up the photograph, cocking my head a little, I realized what I was looking at. A soft-faced woman with dark, intense eyes, shrouded herself in a shawl, covering a morning dress. A small, evil smile quirked up on her face as she faced the lens. Behind her was what I can only assume was the original bed and breakfast, and the back of the photo stated Bed and Breakfast 1885 in Peter's loopy, slanting handwriting. And the letter reads, Dear Daniel, I was incredibly saddened to hear of the death of your father, Peter. He was a good man, a committed family man. There aren't many of those in the world anymore. He visited me once with a friend. They both had shown up for dinner. I hope you'll do the same. I'm located in Whitechapel, London. You should visit me and bring your family. You'll never be amiss at the bed and breakfast, I assure you. I would love to savour your company. Yours truly, Lady Amelia, February 14th, 2015. Oh, and also just for context, in the comments it says Drosophila is part of the Latin name for fruit fly. Interesting. That's rather cool. So the servant is someone that's like a fruit fly, someone that's got caught in their web. Oh gosh, someone didn't get it. Yeah, as brainless Jasper, it is now time for Slim the Cyborg's live stream. And it will be the what the fuck news. What the fuck news Wednesday. So click the link, come see. And I'm potentially thinking of like doing a horror game stream. I don't know, maybe I got a new horror game and it's Layers of Fear? Portrait of Fear? Portrait of Fear. And I might play that tomorrow. I don't know. We shall see. So yeah. Anyway, if not, I shall see you next week for more spooky stories and other shit. So bye.